Hey there, and welcome to the 2018 Santa Slipper Crochet Along. Together, you and I will crochet a pair of slippers that'll keep our toes toasty warm this season. The pattern and supplies list can be found at BHookedCrochet.com/slippercal, that's slipper C-A-L. You can also find that linked in the video description and right here on your screen. Well, let's begin, shall we? In part 2 of the Santa Slipper Cal, we're going to add a little bit to our sole, and we're going to crochet the top part of our slipper. So you'll need your Peyton Shetland chunky yarn, and we're going to incorporate some pipsqueak yarn. Now that we have both of our soles crocheted, we're going to add a little decorative edge to them. So we need to fasten on our pipsqueak yarn. First, I'll create a slip knot. I'm using my same hook. And then I can fasten on in any stitch. I personally like to use one of the stitches on either of the edge. That way it will be in the back part of my slipper. And I'll stick my hook into any stitch, place the loop from the new yarn, and then pull it through the stitch. Now I'll chain one to fasten everything on, but that will not count as our first stitch. We'll go ahead and make a single crochet in the same stitch. And because we're working with a yarn that's really fuzzy, I like to mark this stitch. That way I can look at this when I get to the end of the row and I can see exactly where I need to join. From here, I'll just make one single crochet into every stitch. And one little trick with working with this yarn is to keep everything nice and loose. So when you pull up your loop, just make sure you have a little extra tension. When you yarn over and pull through, it'll flow through really easy. And when you make it all the way around and you have your stitch marker there, we can go ahead and join with a slip stitch to that first single crochet. And we can fasten off. Now we're ready to take our chunky yarn and fasten on once again, so go ahead and create your slip knot. And we're going to join to any stitch from that previous round. And of course, because we're working with this fuzzy yarn, it'll be a little more difficult to see our stitches, but try to fasten on in the same place as before. We'll chain one and then half double crochet in the first stitch. So that chain one, by the way, does not count as a stitch. Now, a little trick that I like to use to help me stay on track as far as my stitch count when I'm working into fuzzy yarns is take a look down at the bottom. Wherever you see one of these indents that kind of goes up, that's typically where you can stick your hook for that next stitch. And it should go right into place. So I've got my next little bump there. So I'll stick my hook right around that space and it'll go right in. Another thing to keep in mind as you're working through this round is that we need to have a particular stitch count. So you can refer back to part number 1. Remember when we did that round where we evenly spaced these single crochet around the sole? Well, that number, whatever that is for you, for the size you're making, that's the same number of stitches we need to have at the end of this round as well. Then when you make it to the end of your round, you'll find your first half double crochet and we'll join with a slip stitch there. We're going to work one more round before we fasten off. We'll chain one, which again will not count as a stitch. We are going to decrease just a little bit here at the very beginning and the very end of this round. So we're going to work the half double crochet 2 together, and since that chain one doesn't count as a stitch, I need to start off in that same place. So I've wrapped the yarn, I'll yarn over and pull up a loop, then I'll wrap the yarn again, insert it into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then I'll yarn over and pull through all the loops on my hook. And then I'll continue with my half double crochet stitches all the way around until I get to those last 2. And when you have 2 stitches remaining on this round, we'll go ahead and half double crochet 2 together once again. So yarn over, insert your hook into that next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through all the loops on your hook. Then we can join with a slip stitch to our first stitch. Now that'll do it for this color, so we can go ahead and fasten off. And we'll set this aside for just a moment. Now the next piece we're going to work on is the top of our slipper, and this is crocheted in the same way as the first 6 rows of our sole. So just a review of that, I'm going to chain 4 for the size that I'm working on. I'll make a single crochet in my second chain from the hook and in each. And rows 2 through 5, we increase at the beginning, so in the first stitch, and we increase in the last stitch as well. And here's what it looks like at the end of the 5th row, so just like our sole. And for row 6, we'll chain 1, turn our work, and work 1 single crochet into every stitch. Now this row is the repeat again like before, but this time we're making it a lot shorter than we did for the sole. So for the small size, my target is 4 inches. So I'm going to repeat this row until it measures about 4 inches from this starting edge right here. If you're working on one of the other sizes, of course, go ahead and refer to those written instructions for your target length. And when you get to that point where your piece measures that target length, we can go ahead and fasten off. That'll do for part number 2. Stay tuned for part number 3 in just a couple of days.